It's funny the things you remember when everything is gone. I don't think about the roar of the engine in my German sedan or the weight of the expensive watch on my wrist. I remember the smell of cut grass on a Saturday morning, the sound of my daughter's laughter as I pushed her on the swing, the way my wife's hand felt in mine as we walked through the park, talking about nothing and everything. These memories are like ghosts now, visiting me in the dead of night in this cheap, musty room that smells of stale cigarettes and regret. They're a constant reminder of a life I didn't just lose. I set it on fire and watched it burn to the ground. It all started with a screen, a flickering, hypnotic screen filled with charts and numbers that promised a different kind of future. A better one. Or so I thought. I had a good life, a solid one. I'd built a small but successful logistics company from scratch. It wasn't a glamorous tech startup. There were no venture capitalists banging down my door, but it was mine. It provided a steady income. It paid the mortgage on our beautiful home. It funded our vacations. It was the foundation upon which our entire world was built. I should have been content. I was content for a while. But a seed had been planted in my mind, a dangerous idea that what I had was merely work, a grind, and that true freedom, true wealth lay elsewhere. It was the idea of passive income, a phrase that sounds so seductive, so intelligent. I started reading, watching videos, diving into the world of investments. The stock market seemed too slow, too traditional. I dabbled in a few shares, but I was impatient. I heard whispers of cryptocurrencies, the wild west of finance, but the volatility scared me. Then I found it, the perfect middle ground, or so it seemed, Forex, the foreign exchange market. It was elegant, sophisticated, a 24-hour global dance of currencies, and I wanted to be one of the dancers. I started small, with a few $1,000s I told myself was play money, a sum our family budget could easily absorb. The initial rush was intoxicating. My first trade, a simple bet on the euro against the dollar, netted me a few $100s in a couple of hours. I had made more money sitting in my home office in my pajamas than my highest-paid driver made in a week of hauling goods across the state. It felt like I had discovered a secret, a cheat code for life. The small wins started to accumulate. I became obsessed. My days, which used to be filled with client calls, logistics planning, and managing my team, were now consumed by economic calendars, candlestick patterns, and technical analysis. I spoke a new language of pips, leverage, and margin calls. When my wife would ask about my day, I'd try to explain the intricate dance of the Japanese yen, but her eyes would glaze over. She saw a man staring at a screen, not a provider building a better future. She saw the distance growing between us, a digital wall of charts and graphs. I started pouring more capital into my trading account. First, it was profits from the business, money that should have been reinvested or set aside. I justified it as a smarter investment, a higher yield. Then it was our personal savings, the nest egg we had carefully built, our financial insurance against the unexpected. I convinced her and myself that this was the way. This was how we would get ahead, how we would pay off the mortgage in 5 years instead of 20, how I could finally stop worrying about the day-to-day grind of my company. My business, my first creation, began to suffer. I was physically present but mentally absent. I missed important meetings, I delegated crucial decisions, I ignored warning signs from my operations manager. My focus was singular, the market. The charts were my world, the price action my heartbeat. The real world, with its tangible responsibilities and the people who depended on me, became a distraction. My wife's concern grew into a quiet, persistent worry. She would bring me a coffee, her hand lingering on my shoulder, and ask me to close the laptop, just for an hour, to come and play with the kids in the yard. Sometimes I would, but my mind would still be on the flickering numbers, my phone buzzing in my pocket with price alerts. The guilt was a dull ache, but the adrenaline of the trades was a powerful anesthetic. I was winning, that was the problem. I was winning just enough to make me feel like a genius, like I had a gift. I read stories of traders who lost it all, but I dismissed them as fools who lacked discipline, who didn't understand risk management. I was different. I was smarter. I was in control. One evening, after a particularly successful week where I had made more than my business's monthly profit, I felt invincible. I pulled my wife close in the kitchen, the smell of the dinner she had cooked hanging in the air. I showed her the number on my trading account screen. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, not happiness, but fear. But I was too high on my own success to see it clearly. I promised her, just a little longer, one more big push and we're done. We'll have everything we ever dreamed of. I'll sell the business, and my only job will be being your husband and their father." I believed it. I truly believed I was doing it all for them. I see now that I was doing it for me, for the ego, for the thrill of the hunt. I had built a solid, reliable ship, my business, but I had become bored of its steady course. I had abandoned it to chase a phantom treasure on a stormy, unpredictable sea, and I was steering my entire family straight into the heart of the hurricane. The idea for the big one, the trade that would change everything, didn't come in a flash of inspiration. It grew slowly, a tumor of arrogance fed by a string of successful trades. I had convinced myself that I had mastered the rhythm of the market, that I could feel its pulse. I saw a pattern forming, a confluence of technical indicators and geopolitical tensions that pointed to a massive, once-in-a-decade move in the British pound. This wasn't just another trade. It was my masterpiece. It was the culmination of everything I had learned. It was the trade that would elevate me from a successful hobbyist to a legend in my own mind. This, I told myself, was the ultimate expression of risk management, one decisive, calculated move that would eliminate all future risk by making it irrelevant. We would have so much money that we'd never have to worry about a budget, a mortgage, or the cost of college ever again. It was the perfect plan, forged in the crucible of my glowing screens. To fund it, I did the unthinkable. I leveraged my entire life. I took out a significant line of credit against my business, draining its lifeblood. The paperwork felt like a formality, the bank manager's warnings about risk a mere whisper against the roaring confidence in my head. Then I went further. I secretly remortgaged our home, the place where our children's heights were marked on a doorframe, the sanctuary I was supposed to protect. The concept of debt felt abstract, a temporary state of being that would be rectified in a matter of days, maybe weeks. I saw it not as a liability, but as fuel. I was pouring gasoline on my ambition, certain it would launch a rocket, never considering it could just as easily create an inferno. The day I placed the trade, the house was unnaturally quiet. My wife had taken the kids to her mother's for the weekend, a gentle suggestion that I had become too tense, too volatile to be around. "You need to rest," she had said, her voice soft but strained. I knew it was more than that. It was a retreat. She was taking them out of the blast zone she felt was imminent. The silence was deafening. There was no laughter from the garden, no pitter-patter of small feet on the hardwood floors. There was only me, the hum of my computer, and the weight of the biggest gamble of my life. I had everything riding on the movement of a single currency pair. The initial hours were agonizing. The market moved sideways, teasing me, tiny green and red ticks that represented thousands of dollars appearing and disappearing. I didn't eat. I barely breathed. My world shrank to the 27-inch monitor in front of me. I watched the lines, the bars, the numbers, willing them to move in my favor. Every news alert, every economic data release from a foreign country sent a jolt of adrenaline and fear through my veins. The world outside my office ceased to exist. Days bled into nights. I slept in my chair, waking every hour to check the charts. A thin layer of grime coated my skin, and a permanent metallic taste of anxiety was in my mouth. I saw my reflection on the dark screen once, a gaunt, wild-eyed stranger with my face. The trade began to move against me. It was a slow drift at first, a gentle current pulling me away from the shore of profitability. I told myself it was normal, a pullback before the big move. I held my position. The amateur sells in a panic, I thought. The professional holds his nerve. This was the test. But the drift became a current, and the current became a river, flowing relentlessly in the wrong direction. The numbers on my screen turned a sickening shade of red. The negative balance grew, first to 5 figures, then to 6. The dream of passive income was becoming a nightmare of active, all-consuming loss. My phone started to buzz with margin call notifications from my broker, automated warnings that my position was becoming unsustainable, that my capital was being vaporized. I ignored them. I transferred the last of the money from the business credit line to prop up my position, doubling down on my conviction. I couldn't be wrong. I had done the research. The market was wrong, not me. It would correct. It had to. My wife called. Her voice was a lifeline from a world I had forgot. "How are you?" She asked, the simple question loaded with a universe of unspoken fears. I lied. "It's going well," I said, my voice hoarse. "Just a bit of volatility. It's all part of the plan." I could hear the skepticism in her silence. She knew. She didn't know the numbers, the specifics of the trade, but she knew me. She knew the sound of my hubris and the brittle edge of my desperation. "Please," she whispered, "just stop. Whatever it is, it's not worth it. Just come home, come back to us." Her plea was the single most sensible piece of advice I had received in months, and I completely rejected it. "You don't understand," I snapped, the frustration and fear boiling over into anger. "This is a complex world of global finance, of shares and economics. This is for us. Why can't you see that?" I hung up, the click of the phone severing the last connection to reason. I was alone now, truly alone with my failing trade. That night, as I stared at the screen, the red number on it now larger than the original value of my entire business, the dread finally broke through the walls of my ego. It wasn't a wave of panic, but a cold, slow-rising tide in the pit of my stomach. The invincibility I had felt just a week ago was a distant, laughable memory. I was not a genius. I was not in control. I was just a man who had bet everything on a coin flip and was now watching it land on the wrong side, over and over and over again. The end came not with a slow bleed, but with a sudden, brutal amputation. I was staring at the chart, my eyes burning from lack of sleep, when a news headline flashed across the bottom of the screen. An unexpected announcement from the central bank, a surprise interest rate decision. It was the black swan event, the statistical anomaly that every trader fears but never truly believes will happen to them. I watched the line on my chart. For a single heart-stopping moment, it froze, and then it fell. It didn't drift, it didn't trend. It plummeted, a sheer vertical cliff of red. The numbers on my screen showing my account balance began to blur, a frantic, cascading waterfall of loss that was happening faster than my brain could process. It was like watching a building being demolished in fast forward. In less than 90 seconds, a decade of my work, our life savings, the value of our home, and the future of my business were erased. Wiped out, gone. The cascade of numbers finally stopped. My account balance was zero. And then it went negative. I owed the broker money I didn't have on top of the monumental debt I had already accrued. The screen froze on that final, obscene number, and then there was silence. A profound, ringing silence that filled the room, the house, my head. The frantic energy of the past few days vanished, replaced by a hollow, cavernous emptiness. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the screen, a monument to my own destruction. I don't know how long I sat there. An hour, a day? Time had lost its meaning. The sun rose, casting a warm glow into the office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like a cruel joke. How could the world just continue? How could the sun have the audacity to rise on my ruin? The hardest thing I have ever had to do was walk out of that office and face the life I had just destroyed. My wife came home that afternoon with the kids. They ran in, shouting about their trip to Grandma's, their voices echoing in the suddenly cavernous house. My wife saw me and stopped. Her smile faded. She knew. She saw it in my face, in the deadness of my eyes. I didn't have to say a word. We sat at the kitchen table, the one where we'd shared thousands of meals, where we'd planned our future. I told her everything. I didn't make excuses. I didn't try to soften the blow. I just laid out the cold, hard facts of my failure, the business credit line, the remortgaged house, the total, absolute loss. I watched the color drain from her face. I watched the last flicker of hope in her eyes die out. There were no shouts, no accusations. Her reaction was so much worse than anger. It was a quiet, devastating grief. She cried silently, tears rolling down her cheeks as she stared at a spot on the wall, seeing not the kitchen but the wreckage of our life. The one thing she said, a whisper that shattered what was left of my heart, was, "I trusted you. We trusted you." The days that followed were a blur of shame and logistics, calls from the bank, calls from the broker, the first notices of foreclosure and bankruptcy. I was a ghost in my own home, packing my life into cardboard boxes. My wife moved with a numb, methodical efficiency. She was protecting the children, creating a bubble of normalcy for them in the midst of the chaos. She never spoke a harsh word to me, but the distance between us was an impassable ocean. The day she left was a quiet, gray Tuesday. She had packed her car and the kids' essentials. She told me she was taking them to stay with her sister indefinitely. She said they needed stability, a place away from the stress and the failure. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. She was a mother protecting her cubs from a predator, and the predator was me, or at least the disaster I had created. I stood on the porch and watched her drive away. My son looked back at me through the rear window, his small hand pressed against the glass. He didn't wave. He just watched until the car turned the corner and disappeared. In that moment, the financial loss felt like nothing. The true bankruptcy was emotional. I had lost my family. I was left alone in the house that was no longer mine, filled with the echoes of a life I had gambled away. I spent the next few weeks selling what was left. Furniture, my car, my watch, the tools from my now-defunct business. Each item sold was a small piece of my identity stripped away. The successful entrepreneur, the provider, the family man, they were all gone. All that was left was this hollow shell of a man, sleeping on a mattress on the floor of an empty house, waiting for the bank to come and claim it. I had hit bottom. It wasn't a dramatic, cinematic fall. It was a slow, quiet, humiliating descent into a darkness so profound I couldn't see any way out. The weight of the debt was crushing, but it was the weight of my shame that was truly unbearable. I had failed the people who mattered most, and I was utterly, completely alone. Rock bottom is a strange place. There's a terrifying clarity to it. When you have nothing left to lose, you lose your fear of losing. The foreclosure finally happened, and I left the house with a single suitcase and a few $100s in my pocket. I found a room in a weekly rate motel on the industrial outskirts of the city, a place where people didn't ask questions. The room smelled of damp carpet and despair. My new life was a brutalist routine. I found a job at a warehouse, loading and unloading trucks. The work was physical, exhausting, and mindless. It was perfect. For 10 hours a day, I could lose myself in the rhythm of lifting, carrying, stacking. My income was a tiny fraction of what I used to make in a single good trading day, but it was real. It was earned with the sweat of my brow and the ache in my back. I would come back to my motel room, my body screaming with fatigue, and fall into a dreamless sleep. There were no charts, no numbers, no flickering screens. The noise in my head, the constant chatter of what-ifs and regrets, began to quiet down, drowned out by sheer physical exhaustion. I was no one. The other guys at the warehouse knew me only as the quiet guy who always took the extra shift. They didn't know about the business I'd built, the house I'd owned, the life I'd torched. In this anonymity, I found a strange kind of peace. My ego, the thing that had driven me to chase impossible wealth, had been starved, beaten, and left for dead. What was left was something simpler, humbler. I started to notice the world again, not as a set of economic indicators, but as it was. I noticed the way the sunrise looked over the loading bay, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I noticed the kindness in the eyes of the woman who ran the motel, who always had a fresh pot of coffee brewing. These small, tangible things became my new reality. I started thinking about the financial buzzwords I used to worship. Passive income. It was a lie. The income I had chased was the most active, all-consuming force I had ever known. It demanded my time, my health, my family, my soul. The simple paycheck I earned now, that was honest. Risk management. I had thought it meant using complex algorithms and stop-losses. I now knew it meant not betting the house you live in, not gambling with your family's security. True insurance isn't a policy, it's a stable job, it's living within your means, it's having people who love you. My new budget was simple: rent, food, gas. Whatever was left, a small amount each week, I put aside. After a few months, I made the hardest phone call of my life. I called my wife. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't ask her to come back. I just apologized. I told her I was sorry for my arrogance, for my selfishness, for breaking my promise to protect them. I told her I was working, that I was stable, and I asked for her bank details. I started sending her money for the kids every single Friday. It wasn't much, just a small portion of my meager paycheck, but it was consistent. It was a promise kept. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually accepted. Our conversations were short, logistical. But over time, a little warmth crept back in. She started asking how I was doing. She told me small stories about the kids. My daughter had lost a tooth. My son had scored a goal in his soccer game. Each little detail was a precious gift, a tiny thread reconnecting me to the world I had lost. I never talked about Forex or Bitcoin or any kind of get-rich-quick scheme again. The allure was gone, replaced by a deep-seated understanding of true value. Value wasn't in a fluctuating currency pair or the next hot stock. It was in the feel of a solid day's work. It was in the sound of my son's voice on the phone. It was in the hope that one day I might be able to sit in a park with my daughter again, not as a rich man, but simply as her father. I'm still in that motel. I still work at the warehouse. My life is small. I haven't recovered my fortune, and I probably never will. I might never get my family back the way they were. But I'm recovering myself. I've paid off the debt to my old broker. I'm slowly rebuilding not a portfolio, but a life, one honest day at a time. This morning I bought a coffee and sat on a bench before my shift, watching the city wake up. I don't have a stock portfolio, a startup, or any grand investments. My wealth can be counted in the few dollars I have in my pocket and the fragile, tentative hope I have in my heart. And for the first time in a very long time, it feels like enough. It feels real. I'd love to hear your reaction. Drop a comment with your thoughts and where you're watching from. Like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more stories.